If you're watching this video right now, you're thinking, yo, I cannot start gardening right now. There's snow on the ground. It's the dead of winter. It's raining from the sky. It's way too cold. It couldn't be further from the truth, my friends. As the self-appointed plant daddy, I'm here to say there's a ton you can do to get a head start on the season. So Jacques, Dagny, and myself are here to give you our top tips. And if there's one you think we missed, comment it down below, and I will personally bless you with 1 month of sunny, perfect weather this spring. And let's get into the video. When we're talking about getting a head start on the gardening season, there is no more classic example than starting seeds indoors, but I have a few twists to my methodologies. Every single season, I'm coming up with something a little bit different, a refinement of the technique, so to speak. And so here are some of the things I'm doing right now, and I'll also talk about some of the plants I would prefer to do this with, and some that you can just chuck right in the ground when the season actually starts. So we're talking seed starting. The first thing to do is figure out how you're gonna do it. You can do it in basically anything. You could have a tray just full of soil that you got from the supermarket that's like would have gone in the recycle. You could use some trays like the ones we have. These are our Epic 6 cells. You could just get a pot and put it in there. It doesn't really matter too much, but what does matter is the type of material you started in. I am a huge fan of keeping things simple and just using a basic potting mix. You can even use some soil from your yard. The only thing that I like to keep in mind is I want this material to be relatively fine. I don't want large chunks. Sometimes you'll even see something like a big rock in here or a bark that's this size. Just want to avoid that. And then this is one of the things that's helped my germination quite a bit. When you're putting it in the tray, however you're deciding to grow, whatever tray you're using, I like to really pack it in. Not like you're making clay or something like that, but you just want to make sure that you have a nice amount of soil in there, and I'll just tap it down a few times. And you can see I even lost a little bit of height there, so I'm just going to come back with some of the debris and put that in. And what that does is it makes it way easier for you to pop the seedling out when it starts. And it also helps with that germination and root development because there's soil kind of right around that root, so it can start growing right away. So once you have your trays set up, what I like to do is grow everything that I am planning to grow for that season anywhere from 1 to 2 months in advance. So let's start with some spring selections. So let's say you live in an area where you've got about 2 months before you can get any plant in the ground in spring. You might do something like a broccoli. This is a Di Chicco variety. I'm not Italian, so don't get me, Italians, in the comments, but this is a really great one because you can grow this up for about 2 to 4 weeks before you even get it in the ground, and you'll speed up your growth quite a bit. And the same thing applies for your summer crops like your peppers or your tomatoes. In fact, those are some of the ones I most prefer to start indoors, even in a Southern California climate like I'm in. So I go 2-3 per hole. And then what I'll do is just make sure that I label correctly. This is the Achilles heel of every gardener. If you're watching this right now, you're probably like, yeah, dude, I forget to label too. I will show you how I do it. That really helps me understand what I grew and when I grew it. So what I will do is I will always go with the plant type first. So this is broccoli, and then I'll do the variety, Di Chicco. Then I'll go the date. Usually I don't put the year, but it's fine, you can do that. And then I will typically do any special preparation or special note. In this case, I know I want this to go in the front raised bed garden. And so then I know exactly everything I need to know when I started it, where it's going, the variety, etc. And then I'll just slot that right in there. It seems basic, and trust me, it seems kind of boring, but if you're like me, you'll start a lot of seeds and then you just will have absolutely no clue exactly what you planted when. Even if you're planting them right now, you go, oh, I'll remember, and then you just do not remember. So label every single time you plant out a tray or plant a pot out, label at that moment. The second you switch to another crop, like this Golden Boy beet, which you can plant indoors, then you want to make sure you label. So I know I belabored that point, but it's very, very important. So another thing that I like to say is you can transplant way more things than you think that you can. In fact, right now I am opening a pack of these Golden Boy beets, and that is a root crop. And a lot of people say, you know, you really shouldn't be starting a root crop indoors, but if you're trying to get a head start on the season, let me tell you guys, it is completely possible. So what you do is with a beet, you just drop one seed in the hole. It's a compound seed, meaning it has more than one seed in this little package here, so you don't need to drop more than one. And then it'll sprout 2 or 3, and you can do basically a Charles Dowding multi-sowing style technique. There'll be a few that come up, and you can actually plant them as a group once that frost starts to die down, and then you can harvest the biggest ones and let the smaller ones grow up, or harvest the small ones, let the big ones grow up. So you get a lot more use out of your seedlings. The only other thing I'll say, and we have a bunch of videos on how to do seedlings from start to finish, is you want to make sure that you keep this in an area that is pretty dark and relatively warm for the first little bit of its life, maybe 3, 4, 5 days. Once you start to see germination, much like this Romanesco cauliflower right here, even a little bit earlier than this, you're gonna wanna put some kind of lighting source on it. If all you have is a windowsill, that's completely fine. But if you do have some sort of lighting system, we have this adjustable seed tray here, so I can just do that. You want the light as close as possible to your seedlings without burning them. And when I say burning, I mean literally burning. The heat can get so hot sometimes that it can actually singe the plant. You don't want that. So as those plants grow up, in this case, of course, you can just kind of telescope this upwards, which is a cool feature, but you could also just put something underneath your tray so that it gets closer or further from the light source. If you are in a cold area, the other thing I'll say, it's not totally necessary, but underneath here I have what's called a seedling heat mat, because most seeds really want to germinate at warmer temperatures than you might have in the winter in your home, especially if you're like me and you live in a very old house that does not have great insulation. I actually need a heat mat if I'm growing these indoors. So there's so much more to seed starting, but it is hands down the easiest way to get a head start on the season. And it's so fun because in the wintertime, you can't grow outside. And so you get to tend to your little seedlings. You know, in my case, I have a ton back here that I'm very excited to grow. I even have an artichoke that's gonna go in the garden. So you can kind of baby these indoors and have a little mini garden. And then when the frost lets up, transplant them in and you're good to go.
It's the end of January and I am holding a 4-pack of tomato seedlings. You might be thinking, it is way too early to put those out on the ground. And you're probably right, but I am using today an ancient piece of technology that it's actually quite simple and people have been using for hundreds of years. And that piece of technology is the cold frame. A very simple box constructed usually out of wood with a transparent material on top. In this case, I have glass, but you could use plexiglass, sheets of plastic, or even an old window that you might have laying around. The idea behind this is that you're creating essentially a mini greenhouse. By creating the box with this angled cut here, you're allowing light to come in at an angle, and ideally you would want to face this to the south so you could capture as much of that winter sun as possible. Now, a couple considerations here when you're using a cold frame. First of all, if you don't open this or have a way of it venting, I actually have an automatic wax piston vent in here. So what happens is when it gets warm, the wax in that cylinder will expand and prop this window or glass surface open as you see right now. If you don't have that, you have to remember to come out every day with a stick, prop it open. Otherwise, you might cook your plants. The other cool thing about these is that the wood is actually quite insulating. So you could totally put this outside somewhere where you get snow and grow lettuce greens and things like that outside under snow cover, no problem. I see people do it all the time. Now we do have 20 different builds on the Epic Gardening blog if you want to see different styles of cold frames that you might want to build. But if you don't want to build anything or you don't want something quite this large, this next thing is a very simple solution that anyone can use no matter how big your garden is. So you don't want to do a complicated build, or maybe you just have 1 or 2 plants that you don't want to dedicate an entire structure to. Well, this is exactly for you. These are our critter cages. Now you might be asking yourself, how the heck is something covered in holes going to keep my plants from freezing? Well, it's actually a little addition that we just added. Let me get this in the ground and I'll show you exactly how it works. What I have here is one of my overwintered peppers in our 5-inch cube pot. And actually, it's been putting out a lot of new roots that I could see coming out to the edges. So this guy's ready to go back out in the garden, and it is even starting to regrow. But if I put this out here just now and left it to the elements, it probably wouldn't have a very good time. So what I'm going to do instead is go ahead, get this planted in nice and tight. I'm going to take my critter cage here. The secret to making something like this actually protect your plants is to use frost fabric. You can get frost fabric from many different places. This one is designed specifically to fit right over our critter cage, and it will offer about 10 degrees of added temperature support. So if it's like 30 degrees outside, this will be as if it is 40 and protect your plants from those frosts that might otherwise kill it. To install it, there's 2 loops on this, and all you have to do is pull it over the top, get it nice and snug around the cage here. And the nice thing is it has these little loops so you can actually staple them down to the earth, and that'll stop this from blowing away if it's too windy. It'll stop it from getting picked up by something like a raccoon or a pest. And the other thing I'd like to recommend is actually once you do something like this, it's hard to get it fully sealed, and you could either hill it up with soil like so, or you could just take a whole bunch of mulch and layer it all around it. Once it's all covered up in mulch like this, it will be protected from any of those extra cold winds that might sneak underneath. And the really cool thing that I love about these is that you could put this wherever you want. I could now plant direct seed, other things that are more cold tolerant around this without a problem. Or let's say I had a container like over here, I could also plant in containers as well, just like that. So it's a very amenable system to wherever you're growing, however you're growing, and they provide 10 degrees of protection, which should give you a nice head start in the garden.
If you live somewhere with a short growing season like I do, we can actually start our seeds months earlier, no grow light needed. We're just gonna harness the power of nature. When we sow seeds using this method, we're going to be mimicking nature, which means that the seedlings themselves will be a lot healthier, more robust, and cold hardy. In fact, you're not even gonna need to harden off these seedlings at all, because they've basically been hardening off since the moment we planted them. To get started with this winter sowing method, you need some kind of jug. I have a vinegar jug here. You can also use a milk jug or a water jug. It just needs to be semi-opaque with a fairly deep bottom, and I like to have one that has a narrow opening at the top that we can remove the lid from. We need some sharp implements. I've got a small knife and some scissors here. I have my spinach seeds. You can use all sorts of different types of seeds. It just depends on your climate. I have some tape to seal up that jug, and I also have popsicle sticks to write what I actually planted on inside of the jug so that it doesn't wash away. So the very first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna pop some drain holes in the bottom of the jug. And we just wanna be really careful while we push through here. There we go. And I'd like to do about 4, depending on the size of the container. Now what we need to do is actually cut open the container itself. The only important thing to note is we want to leave a hinge right along that handle point. And it doesn't need to be quite this deep. With a container like this, I'll probably go about here. And I've just pre-moistened this soil so that I won't need to disturb the seeds at all when I place them. Next, we're going to add our spinach seeds. I'm using a Bloomsdale spinach, and you can really over sow in this case because they're not going to stay in here. We'll cover these spinach seeds to about 1/2 inch deep, and then we just need to make our label. I'm going to stick the label inside, and now all we have to do is seal it up. I'm taking off the lid at this point. We do want to just leave this off so that any rain and snow can get inside and it can vent a little bit. All this left to do is seal this up and put it in the right location. We're just going to place our jug along a south-facing wall where it can get the maximum sun exposure and protection from the wind. Every crop is going to be a little bit different in terms of timing when you can move these from the milk jugs out into the ground. But as a general rule, as long as your transplants have 2 to 3 true leaves and your ground can be worked, you can move these outside probably about 2 to 4 weeks earlier than you would be able to had you started your seedlings indoors. This tunnel isn't just how I grow food all winter long, even in the snow. It's also key to germinating my seedlings and getting a head start on those long season crops like eggplant and peppers that don't tend to do as well if you live in a short season climate like I do. And it does this by keeping the inside temperature at least 20 degrees warmer than it is outside. I started by hammering in some rebar stakes along the 4 corners and just leaning some wood baseboards up against that so that when I bent my cattle panel into place, it would stay there with just tension. I didn't even need to use any additional power tools. After that, I added the plastic over the top and I used heavy-duty tarp clips to keep that in place. But the key that keeps my soil from freezing and keeps the inside of this greenhouse tropical, even when it's 0 degrees outside, is actually in the double layering that I use inside. So let's go check that out. The cattle panel on the outside of the greenhouse is wrapped in special greenhouse plastic, but inside the greenhouse, I've used this lightweight row cover to create an additional layer of insulation. And this lightweight row cover is super important because it still allows enough sunlight in for the plants to continue to grow while trapping that sunlight to keep my soil from freezing, which means I can plant my warm weather crops like peppers a lot sooner than I would be able to otherwise.
This tip is how to get almost a year ahead of next season and start planting way, way earlier. This is like the most important one I've used specifically for my peppers. And I know I've talked about this before on the channel, but I think it's so important. I've even evolved this strategy slightly. So it's overwintering your peppers, which means you'll make a note this season to do this for the next season when you pull these peppers out of the ground. Normally you'd rip these out, compost them. Okay, my peppers are done. And then you'd start more pepper seeds, which you can do. But if you have peppers you know you love, I have a Bikini white pepper, beautiful. It's actually one of the ones that at Trader Joe's, they put in those little pepper drop snacks. I like them, my girlfriend likes them, grow your own. Hungarian round, I have a jalapeno. I know I want those in the garden every single year. So what I do is I will clip off about 2/3 of their growth. So you can see these are really kind of chopped up. And then I'll dig them out of the ground. I'm putting them in a small pot. This is our 5-inch pot that we actually just launched, but any pot will do. And then I will just prune these leaves off. So this isn't ready to go into the garden just yet because it's still mid to late January. I want to wait a couple more months. So I'm just going to take some of this growth off to force it back into that dormant phase. That's pretty much the only thing you've got to do when you're overwintering these peppers. The only other thing I'll say is maybe water them like once a month. Remember, there's no leaves, there's not a lot of transpiration. The roots are using some water, but they really are kind of dormant. And if you want to trim them up a little bit more, you totally can. But the reason this is so powerful is because I know I want a jalapeno in my garden every single year. I know I have this beautiful jalapeno right here. So why not just put this in? And it's like putting in a transplant on steroids. It is gonna start way, way faster. It's gonna grow way bigger. And in that second, third, fourth, sometimes even fifth, sixth year of growth, you'll get so many more peppers than you would if you started a jalapeno from seed over and over and over again. That's my final one for you guys. Check out our seed starting guide. If you're curious how to get going, you can always shop our store at shop.epicgardening.com. Good luck in the garden and keep on growing.